Hey guys, what's happening? Thanks for tuning in, coming back and watching. I appreciate it. Hope your day's going really well. And today I'm in Luminar Flex, and it won't be too long that I'll just be in Luminar 4, and I'm pretty excited about that. But in the meantime, I'm in Flex and Luminar 3 and those kind of things, working on the current products, and still have things I want to share with you. So, having said that, I've got a landscape photo today, and this is going to kind of be a sample workflow on landscapes in Luminar. And the truth is, if you see a lot of my videos, I travel a lot to cities, and therefore I take a lot of city photos. So street photos, cityscapes, skylines, and one of the things I really like to do is manipulate color and light and detail and all those kind of things. And a lot of those things, while you can do in landscapes, you don't really need to do as much. Mother Nature, of course, depending on what landscape you're shooting, Mother Nature's done a pretty good job. She did okay. I'm kidding. Nature's beautiful. Landscapes can be beautiful, and sometimes they don't need so much. So this is kind of a simple workflow. So here's the photo. Now, this was shot in Wales this summer when I was over there. Now, obviously, there's a man-made structure in this. I still consider it a landscape in that it's primarily Mother Nature at play here with a little bit of visual interest created by humans, right? I love obviously the elevated lighthouse, but I love the steps that kind of wind up that little hill to the lighthouse. Regardless, I'm in Luminar, and really just a few filters and a little bit of massaging, I turned it into that. And the truth is, even now as I look at it, there's other things I might want to go fix. And it's just a problem, my friends. I always look at my photos like a day later or an hour later, or in this case, 5 minutes later, and I'm like, why did I do that? I really should change that. So anyway, I'm going to reset these, and we're going to walk through it. Okay, so this is the develop filter. This is a JPEG image. There's before and after. As you can see, a slight bit of contrast, lifted the shadows and the whites, a little bit of clarity. So truthfully, it went from that to that, which isn't really that noticeable. And so one of the things I recommend, I generally like to start with the develop filter in Luminar 3, Flex, etc. But I highly recommend the Accent AI 2.0 filter because wow, look at that. I mean, I'm pretty high. I'm at 81, so that's pretty significant. But if you look at the change in the photo, you can see it does things around light, quite obviously, but also some color pop and some contrast. And so in many ways, it's kind of a super filter, kind of an easy button. But I kind of feel like it overdid it here. Now, again, some of that's because I'm at 81, but I like the light here. I'm just a little bit concerned about some of the color. And so I'll mess with that in a minute. Next up was adjustable gradient, and I set the orientation a little bit higher. Basically, I put the middle line right there on the horizon line, and I didn't do anything in the top, but in the bottom, I added a little bit of an exposure increase and a little bit of contrast. So there's the before and there's the after. It's fairly slight, but I really want to play up that staircase and kind of how it winds, as I said, up to the lighthouse. And so I wanted to lighten the foreground a little bit. And generally speaking, I think in a landscape, things that are closer to you are going to appear to be a little bit lighter, right? So that's why I'm there, basically. So here's the before, and here's the after. Now we're getting there, but if you haven't noticed or haven't really been concerned about it, the greens in the hill are just, they're too green, and I'm not really sure I like that. Now, it kind of looked like that. I mean, there's the before. You can see that kind of green shade and vibrancy, kind of. It's a darker exposure, but it's really kind of getting kind of crazy. So I went into HSL, which I think is probably the best filter in Luminar for adjusting all the individual components of color. And so there's a number of things you can do, but one of the things I wanted to point out, and this is, I think this comes into play in a lot of landscapes, and that is, notice the yellows and greens, because let me put this back. If you're looking at that, that's how it was before I did yellow and green saturation. If you just come in here and say, well, there's too much green, I'm going to take the saturation down. It does reduce it, but it looks kind of splotchy, looks kind of weird. But, take a look at when you reduce the yellow saturation, right? It actually does a better job on the greens, and that's because these greens in particular are heavily yellowed, right? And so I don't even remember what number I was at, so I'm just going to kind of play around here, but keep that in mind that If you're not getting the greens that you like, don't hesitate to use the yellow because the green is made up of a whole lot of yellow, basically. It happens all the time for me in grasses, fields, meadows, wherever there's a lot of green like that. Try the yellow and you'll often find that you'll get pretty good results. I also took down the saturation of the blue. Let me show you the before. When I did Accent AI, let me show you that. The sky was kind of grayer, and Accent AI does pop a little bit of color, and that gray is real close to like a steely kind of blue, and so in my opinion it kind of starts popping that color. And so when I got into HSL, I wanted to pull that down. Now I love blues, and in cityscapes, especially at blue hour, I'll amp up the blue. I love blues, but I'm trying to make this as kind of natural as possible, and so I felt like it was important to take the blues down. I also wanted to show you here on the greens, I also increased the hue of the green. So let me show you the before. There's the green. It's kind of a faded green at this point. Now, if you go this way, you can start to make it look like it's fall, which it wasn't. It was summer and it was green. But you could do that and then mess with the oranges and yellows and reds and start making it look like it was fall. But I'm not trying to create a fake fall image. I'm just trying to make the greens look nice. So I actually went this way. Now you can go really far to the right and you start to get that kind of, nuclear leprechaun kind of green if you're not careful. So I don't want to go really high with that super intense kind of an HDR green, but I felt like, I don't even know where I was to be honest, but I feel like it looks pretty good there. And that's at 35. Let me see the before and the after HSL. If you look at the blue sky and if you look at this hill, the blues are very different. There's blue before HSL and there's blue after. Now, if you look at the lower half here, there's green before, kind of yellowy looking actually, and there's green now. I think it looks a lot more natural. And luminance, I also reduced the luminance of the blue. Again, that's in the sky, so let me set that back to 0. You can see the sky's a little bit brighter. Now that I take that down, you could go like that. I don't want to go too low. I think it was at like 35, but also notice that when you pull those blues down, the clouds get darker compared to the white parts because that's where the blue is. So that creates a little bit more contrast in the sky. And I think that kind of works. And so that's what I did in HSL, and that might be the biggest part of what I did in the photo. Speaking of contrast in the sky, you could also come over here to top on adjustable gradient and say, hey, contrast in the top of the photo and try to get something there. We're not getting a lot, so in this case, the blue luminance reduction really helped with that quite a bit. Next up was structure, and normally you'll see me apply negative structure to the sky and like positive structure to the rocks, but in this case, I actually went negative structure on the entire photo. I liked how it smoothed out the sky, and I'm not trying to over smooth the water. It is a little bit choppy, but this is a single exposure, not a long exposure, and I'm not trying to over smooth it. And in fact, even negative 100, the water, it doesn't look like a long exposure to me that well. It looks kind of like I'm trying to blur it out more intentionally. So I think it was at negative 30 or something. I don't remember, but I actually like the negative structure across the whole photo. This part of the photo with the lighthouse and the rocks is still a little bit crispy, even though I've taken structure down across it. So there's before and after. I don't feel like I lost a whole lot, but I feel like I gained a lot in the sky. And it softens up that rock a little bit. I don't know. It worked for me here, especially the grass. You're not going to expect the grass to be really crunchy. The rock, maybe. So you could come back, add structure again, brush it into some of the rocks, or maybe just the pathway and maybe into the lighthouse. But I liked it like that. So just a thought. And the last thing, honestly, I got to here and I said, I like that. I'm done. I think I'm done and I'm happy. But I just like to edit photos and I'm never satisfied. As I said, I always go back a day later or whatever and think, oh, that's terrible. I didn't think this was terrible, but I felt like it was missing just a tiny smidge of something. So I used the tone filter, and I don't even know if you can tell. So it was a minor bump in contrast of 5, smart tone of 11, and I took down the highlights just 15. So before and after, it's tiny. I might even give it a little bit more contrast. Just be careful on this kind of stuff. When I start adding contrast, these shadows, because you're creating contrast, start to get really dark. These rocks start to get really dark, and it just looks overdone. So I think it looks fine. I think I was originally on 5. I think as high as 15 actually probably works okay. Smart tone looks fine at 11. Let me show you at 0. Let me just double click that. There it is at 0 and at 11. That's 15 or something. So something like that I think looks fine. Again, just balancing out the light. And that's part of the dance I always talk about. I'm always, even though I like to do light first, I'll often come back and add light adjustments at the end, just like I did here with tone. So there's no right way to do any of this. It's all about experimentation and feel and just figuring out what look you like and kind of going after it. And that was really it. I just kind of wanted to share this workflow. So here's a before and after. You can see I made quite an impact on the photo. And if I wasn't sitting here yapping about all these filters, this was probably, probably 10 minutes of me experimenting and playing around, just trying to get the look that I wanted. But it can be fairly quick, and that's the power of Luminar. There's the before, there's the after. I hope it helps. Hope it gives you some ideas, and I do appreciate you watching, my friends. Just a simple landscape workflow video. Thanks for watching. I'll see you soon. Take care of yourself, and don't hesitate to leave some comments. Let me know. Feel free to share, subscribe, like, and I'll see you soon, my friends. Have a great day. Take care, and adios.